Human ingenuity created wine. It has positive and less positive effects, but it is a potent symbol of human power. As we raise our cups, let us be mindful and respectful of the power and its effect on our community. Baruch Haor Ba'alam, Baruch Haor Ba'adam, Borei Pri Hagafen. Please say with me, blessed is the light in the world, blessed is the light of humanity that brings forth the fruit of the vine. L'chaim. Kaddish, Beauty of the World by Marcia Falk. Praise the world, praise its fullness and its longing, its beauty and its grief. Praise stone and fire, lilac and river, and the solitary bird at the window. Praise the moment when the whole bursts through pain and the moment when the whole bursts forth in joy. Praise the dying beauty with all your breath, and praising, see, the beauty of the world is your own. In Tuesdays with Maury by Mitch Albom, Maury Schwartz says, death ends a life, not a relationship. Those we remember, whom we hold in our hearts, are still part of our lives. We remember those murdered in Highland Park and from violence all over the country and all over the world. We also remember our loved ones whose yard sites we observe in this season and in any season. May their presence be far more powerful than their absence. In Jewish life, we say, Zecher Sadakim Livracha, the memory of good people blesses us. Ellen will now sing this.
הנה מה טוב ומנעים, שבת אחים גם יחד. הנה מה טוב ומנעים, שבת אחים גם יחד. הנה מה טוב ומנעים, לה 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 לה. הנה מה טוב ומנעים, לה 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 לה. הנה מה טוב ומנעים, הנה מה טוב ומנעים, הנה מה טוב ומנעים, לה 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 לה. הנה מה טוב ומנעים, שבת אחים גם יחד. הנה מה טוב ומנעים, שבת אחים גם יחד.
I take comfort in singing, which is better than the comfort eating that I've been doing the last 2 weeks. I've been eating way too much ice cream, but I take comfort in singing. And this particular song, I feel like it has comforted other people at times. Kind of, well, I'm just going to sing it. I lost my note.
Somewhere over the rainbow, way up high, there's a land that I heard of once in a lullaby. Somewhere skies are blue, and the dreams that you dare to dream really do come true. Someday I'll wish upon a star and wake up where the clouds are far behind me, where troubles melt like lemon drops, away above the chimney tops is where
Birds fly over the rainbow. Why then, oh, why can't I? If happy little bluebirds fly beyond the rainbow, why, oh, why can't I?
There we go. We are delighted to have Paul Golin here tonight. I'm going to ask Victoria to come up one more time and introduce.
Okay, I'm pretty short. That's why you can't see my whole face. Paul Golin is the executive director of the Society for Humanistic Judaism, which is the North American organizing body of humanistic Jewish communities like ours. So if you're a member here at Kol Hadash or at another SHJ affiliated congregation, you're also a member of the SHJ. Paul is a writer, speaker, advocate, and consultant on issues of importance to the Jewish community, including secularity, intermarriage, disaffiliation, and inclusion. Paul co-authored 2 books, and his writing has appeared in the Forward, Jewish Week, Huffington Post, and elsewhere. He is the white Ashkenazi half of a, quote, Japanese, Jewish/Japanese multiracial household and administers the Japanese page on Facebook. And he's also a lovely person. So thank you for coming to be with us today.
Hi, everybody. Hi, everyone on Zoom. Thank you, both groups, for putting up with the technical mishigas. I actually have HBO studio productions on my resume, believe it or not, but clearly this is not that. The rabbi here, Adam Shalom, when I told him I'm going to turn this into a both hybrid and in-person event, expressed great worry. And I was like, don't worry about it. But actually, it was a ploy on my part just to make sure you all know how important Adam is to your community in so many ways. I do like to try to keep talks lighthearted, but we are 6 miles from the site of the Highland Park mass shooting that took place less than 2 weeks ago. As you already heard, it's obviously affected everybody in the community, and some tragically. So obviously we send our condolences to those folks. My visit here to Kol Hadash was scheduled months ago. And even back then I had wanted to talk about ways to share the meaning in humanistic Judaism with more people. And with all that's going on in the world, including what happened here, that seems even more urgent than it did just a few months ago. So hope and courage are 2 of the ideas regularly referenced in humanistic Judaism. And tonight, I'd like to offer a bit of a meditation on what those words mean to me. And I hope to open it up, as technology will allow, for us to have a conversation about it. I'd like to hear what those words mean to you of hope and courage. The founding rabbi of humanistic Judaism, Sherwin Wine, spoke of hope often and included it as one of only 4 lines in his poem, Eifo Ori, Where is My Light, which once I started at SHJ came to recognize that that is our Shema, or even our national anthem. That line being, where is my hope is in me. Hope, of course, is not exclusive to humanistic Judaism. So here's a quote from the late chief rabbi of England, Jonathan Sacks, who was modern Orthodox. And he said, to be a Jew is to be an agent of hope in a world serially threatened by despair. Every ritual, every mitzvah, Every syllable of the Jewish story, every element of Jewish law is a protest against escapism, resignation, or the blind acceptance of fate. Judaism is a sustained struggle, the greatest ever known, against the world that is, in the name of the world that could be, should be, but is not yet. So while a piece of that rings a bit Judeo-centric for me, and certainly hope is not exclusively Jewish either, I do feel like what he's describing speaks to the mission that I want to be on and does connect me to Jewish history and Jewish identity. And I think what is special and maybe unique about humanistic Judaism, and I'd love to get into this with all of you, is the interplay between hope and courage. For me, hope is not remaining cheerful under devastating circumstances. It's not bucking up despite knowing all is lost. And for secular humanists in general, it's not promising that things will work out better for us in the next life or in the hereafter. We want realistic hope. Our hope has limits. Last month, one of SHJ's staff members had a close relative choose death with dignity, which is medically assisted end of life. And I didn't know the person, but I've been thinking about that a lot ever since. And because my first inclination when I heard that that was her choice was, surely there's still some hope, for a miracle. And I actually believe that many traditional Jews, and I think Orthodox rabbis, would argue against death with dignity, that Jewish law suggests life is the highest value and must be sustained regardless of the suffering. And that's one example where humanistic values diverge from traditional Jewish values. And I think that there are a lot of those instances. And I came to realize that while one understanding of hope was gone for this person who chose death with dignity, her courage rose up and set an example for her loved ones. And it also provided the opportunity for her to live out other values like human dignity and getting a chance to express love with her limited time left. So hope and courage are not always complementary. Sometimes one replaces the other. But often hope and courage are complementary. We can hope for a better world, and then we can find the courage to do what we think can get us there. The title of a book about and in tribute to Rabbi Schoenwein is A Life of Courage. The initial act of courage that started humanistic Judaism was fulfilling the need to, quote, say what we believe and believe what we say. By removing God from our Jewish holiday and life cycle liturgy. We just had a Shabbat service, and I just said the word God for the first time since we gathered. In the mid-1960s, that was radical, and Schoenwein took a lot of grief from his rabbinic colleagues for doing so. And I would say that the non-theistic liturgy that has emerged from that innovation does provide hope and meaning for people. It shows that life continues as we mark time with Jewish holiday celebrations and life cycle events. It allows us to connect to our world, our Jewish heritage, and connect with other people in our community as a kind of extended family. So one mission for our movements is to spread the word, to find and serve those Jews who already believe as we do and don't know that there is this option, and instead have chosen not to celebrate Jewish holidays in community with other Jews and not to mark life cycle events Jewishly because they don't want to say those words, because they think those are things that only religious Jews do. And in my work at SHJ, when I get to talk about this immediately, because one of the first questions anyone asks is, what do you do? and I say Society for Humanistic Judaism, and I can't just leave it at that because no one knows what that means. So I have to explain it. And often what I hear back is, oh, yeah, I guess that describes what I believe. And then immediately followed by, I've never heard of you before. So I know that there's a big population out there for us to reach and serve that we need to get there. But even today, it takes a degree of courage to be openly secular. Not so much in the Jewish community. One of the things that we've done at SHJ is become a member of something called the Jewish Social Justice Roundtable, which has all the other non-Orthodox denominations represented, as well as other great social justice organizations like Bend the Arc. And we have a seat at that table. And there is no flinching when I talk about being atheist or agnostic or secular or humanistic, because they know that we represent a significant percentage of Jews. But in US society in general, we're still a minority. We're still underrepresented. The Pew Research Foundation has been tracking what they call the nuns, N-O-N-E-S. Their latest number is 29% of Americans say they are either atheist, agnostic, or nothing in particular. But only one person in all of the US Congress is openly not religious. His name is Jared Huffman from Northern California. And if you are in the business of writing checks to politicians, I'm not endorsing him for office, but I'm just saying. One thing that I think about a lot, so obviously there's a big segment of Jews that we can go out and get. And Pew Research also did a really interesting study, if you haven't looked at it, a couple of years ago in 2020 of American Jews. And they asked a question that I was so glad to see, because I'm pretty sure the first time it's been asked in this way: do you believe in the God of the Bible? And only 26% of American Jews said yes to that question, which is significantly lower than the 56% of all Americans who said yes to that question. And they asked a follow-up question to the folks who said, no, I don't believe in a God of the Bible. They asked, do you believe in any higher power or spiritual force? And to that, 50% of American Jews said yes, leaving 22% who said no to either the God of the Bible or any other understanding of God. 22% compared to 10% of all Americans. It's a dramatically large number of Jews who are just flat out atheist or agnostic. Unfortunately, they didn't ask a follow-up question to the 50% who said yes, some other higher power, because I'd love to know, does that higher power hear your prayers? Does it respond to your prayers? Or is it just a synonym for nature? I think there's a larger conversation to be had in the Jewish community. I think that 22% who are just flat out atheist agnostic is an undercount, because I think a big chunk of that 50% also would describe God in the exact same words as all of us might describe nature or the universe. And regardless, liberal Jews, meaning from us on one end of the spectrum all the way through conservative Judaism, have near unanimity on a lot of social issues. And the question is, how hard does SHJ push on this issue? Can we let it go? Can we allow people to have their comfort? And I want to, but I'm also very concerned about that word, God, because the fundamentalists hear it and think something completely different than the way that word is being used in Reform and conservative synagogues. So I think it's a very interesting conversation, and I think Humanistic Judaism is in a really unique place to facilitate that conversation pluralistically. Can I say politically, can I say in that, sitting at that Jewish Social Justice Roundtable, where I'm one of the only openly secular people, I hope for a world that is more secular in the future than it is today. Is that okay for me to say in Jewish settings? There is great religious privilege that is unseen in organized Jewish life. You have a federation here, you have a JCC. When they do Hanukkah events, don't they presume everyone lights the candles in the same way with the same blessing and with the same prayers to God? There's no controversy. And certainly the majority of Jews in this area and everywhere else is not at that event. And I think a piece of the reason why is exactly because of that, because of the belief or understanding that this is what all Jews do. This is how all Jews believe. So I mean, there's a tension because we can't do it alone. We need allies to make the positive changes we want to make in the world. Liberal religious people, the people who are in this building on Sunday, are our allies. And I don't want to remove the comfort that they find in their religion. And yet there is this tension. When I started at SHJ, and I'm going on 6 years now, which is remarkable and time is flying, I recognize that the original innovation of non-theistic liturgy, on the one hand, allowed literally tens of thousands of Jewish households to stay connected to Jewish community. And that's a remarkable accomplishment. And yet at the same time, looking at those pew numbers and knowing how many we're not reaching, there has to be a recognition that ritual and liturgy is not the only way to be Jewish. And humanistic Judaism is much larger than this organizing model of congregationalism. So it's not either or, but it's and as well. What else can we be doing? And I asked, what social justice happens? And I was told, local communities have different approaches. And on the national level, our board often wrote statements, shared it with the movement, and then moved on to the next statement. So we created an initiative around what I learned was the point of most consensus in our movement, which is separation of church and state. And it's called Jews for a Secular Democracy. We have had a number of very generous donors who have supported it over the last few years. And one of them, our lead donor, actually expressed very recently how remarkable it is that all of our worst fears have come true. Like, at least we were ahead of the curve, but wow, it's bad now for separation of church and state. And we, I think, are at least doing something about it. And I think we are bringing a Jewish voice to the issues related to separation of church and state, which we can also get into if you want. The big one right now is abortion, obviously, which I very much see as a church-state separation issue because it's being litigated based on one religion and really just one version of one religion over all others or no religion. And what's been nice about Jews for a Secular Democracy is we as the conveners get to make sure that secular Jewish voices are included along with religious Jewish voices. It's pluralistic, but we're actually bringing real pluralism to this initiative. I hear the word pluralistic in the Jewish community a lot, and in a lot of people's minds, it goes from Reconstructionism to ultra-Orthodoxy. And we're expanding, we're shifting that spectrum because we kind of get cut off at modern Orthodoxy for the issues that we're advocating for with separation of church and state. Because another one is keeping public education secular and keeping religion out of public schools and keeping tax dollars out of religious schools, all of which is under great threat. So we've got consensus about that. We don't have consensus on a bunch of other issues. And frankly, I wonder if it's a question of my own courage to talk about how I feel about Israel, for example. I'm going to Israel in November. Knock on wood, if that's a superstition I can maintain. All right, knocking on wood does not work. We are secular humanists. I did not just knock on wood. But the Jewish Social Justice Roundtable actually is bringing me to Israel, which is amazing. And it's going to focus on a number of issues, including peace between Israelis and Palestinians. And one of the things I said when we were talking about me going is I'd love to hear about secular Palestinians, because I can't help but think if you can get secular Jews and secular Palestinians to just say to jointly together, these people are nuts, then maybe there's some commonality there. Anyway, when I come back, I feel like I'll be more equipped to talk about Israel, but I know I'm going to make a lot of people unhappy. I know Adam Shalom has done some programming here. I know that the way into it is to talk about civility and how do we disagree in civil ways. I feel like there's always going to be a range of beliefs, but I really will find, I do find my patience tried by folks who feel that one side or the other is completely right and the other side is completely wrong. I feel like that is a recipe for going nowhere. So I struggle with that, and I haven't put out anything about Israel. And we have a very, what I think is, to be a little bit critical, vanilla statement on a two-state solution on SHJ's website. And I always just point people to that. At least we still are taking a stand that we want to see peace. We want to see a two-state solution. Even that can be divisive. So that's one challenge. And the other, I was told, is guns, and that there is a wide range of opinions about guns. And certainly I thought of it immediately after what happened here. And again, the board of SHJ wrote a statement about reasonable gun control. I linked to it in an email that I sent out to our movement. But when I think about hope and courage, the hope piece for me is a vision of the future. And in my vision of the future, guns are somehow obsolete, are not needed. And I understand that then when you get back to the conversation about the here and now, for some people that will sound naive and they'll say, well, I have to protect my home. I understand I have a very extensive toy collection and I feel like I need to somehow protect that and my family. But I don't own a gun, and I will say that I've spent considerable time in countries in which private individuals are not allowed to own guns and felt safer there than I do in my own neighborhood. And I want to be able to say that, and I want to be able to have conversations with it. And in Humanistic Judaism, in theory, we've got a template for discussing issues using humanism and the values of humanism, including reason and logic and science and what the data tells us, but also empathy and so on. But even within all of that, there is disagreement, there is room for disagreement. There are folks on both sides of many issues using what they feel is a humanistic approach to come to very different conclusions. And it's a great challenge. So I hope moving forward in the future, we will be courageous enough to have conversations around some of these tough issues, even while I will spend most of my time focused on the issues that spring from separation of church and state. There's more than enough work to be done on that. And this is, frankly, not the end, sadly, but the beginning of a Supreme Court that is ruling based on what I call, and what I think the term of art is, white Christian nationalism. And we should call it white Christian nationalism, and we should tell our Christian friends and allies that the phrase is not Christian, the phrase is Christian nationalism. Or there's actually a technical word for it, I don't know if you've heard, dominionism, which basically believes that Christians have dominion over the world and should run it and should run America, and America should be based on Christian law. And this is not some fringe group hiding out in their mother's basement. This is, 5 out of the 9 Supreme Court justices, or 6. So we've got a lot of work to do on pushing back. And I think we have a lot to say as both Jewish people and secular people. But it starts with the hope. What is the vision for the future? What do we hope for? And then the courage to get that done. So I'll pause there. And thank you so much for listening. And I don't know how we're going to work this to hear from folks, but I'm going to look at the chat, but I'd love if folks want to comment, provide their own ideas about what hope is. I would ask you to try your best to limit it to 2 minutes. I'm inviting you to speak, but you're not the invited speaker. So does somebody have some reactions to it? What do you think of when you think of hope and courage? I have my reading glasses on, so I can't see anything. Yeah, that would be great.
So I really would respond to a lot of things, but one of the things that I've been thinking about a lot of.
For those on Zoom who may not have heard the question, I'm going to paraphrase just to see if I got it right. But basically, are you asking are secularism perhaps intended to drive a wedge in society, or accidentally driving a wedge in society? Right. Is live and let live still a tenable position? Great. Of course, but who's not letting whom live, right? And I think that's really, that's the really great message that Jews can bring to a country that sadly still knows very little about Jews. And the truth is, we are 2% of the US population. We are, overrepresented in cities and Hollywood, it's true. Science, arts, doctors, all of that good stuff. But we're still only 2%. And I do think many more Americans know about Jews and Judaism today than they did 50 years ago. And I think a reason why is thanks to intermarriage. One of the positives of intermarriage that gets no thanks from the organized Jewish community usually, but it's something that I have in-laws in Japan who now at least know a couple of Jews. So I do think, and frankly, this may have been the Jewish mission all along, right? And we got a lot of persecution for it. But, when I think about the numbers that I shared about why are there so many secular Jews, and we've been secular way before, like now it's a trend, now it's cool. But we've been secular before it was cool, and in very large numbers. And to me, this is process, and it happened to me when I was a kid. I know it didn't happen to everybody, but I looked around at an overwhelmingly Christian world, and I grew up in New York. I grew up in Staten Island, but it was only Christmas at the mall. It was only Christmas in my public school at that time. Now they give us a little table off to the side at least, but it was, and I asked myself, how could all these people be so wrong? And then how could I think I'm right if all these people are so wrong? I really wonder how folks who are deeply believing of one very specific religious story read about the literally thousands of other global religions and tell themselves, well, those people got it wrong, all of them, but we got it 100% right. We're spot on with this. Moses absolutely split the Red Sea, but Jesus did not come down off that cross. I don't personally understand it, but I know that it exists. So I don't know. For me, it is the mission, and I am concerned about this fine line of not pissing off everybody, but also kind of wanting to agitate. Now, there's a whole segment. So we have one foot in the Jewish Social Justice Roundtable, which is, I love everyone involved. They are great organizations. I'm totally past religiosity with them regardless because of what we are advocating for. Our other foot is in the Secular Coalition for America, which is another great umbrella organization that has groups like American Humanist Association, American Atheists, Freedom from Religion Foundation, Center for Inquiry, and a whole bunch of other groups as well. And they are advocating, some of them pretty hardcore, for secularity. I think the commonality is we're advocating for equality for secular Americans, but some are much louder than others in saying, in putting down religion. I don't want to put down religion. My wife is, as you heard, is from Japan. When we lost our dog, which was very sad, she said, I believe I'll see him again, because she believes in reincarnation. And I'm not going to be the jerk to say, no, you won't. You know, why would I do that? It was a comfort for her. And I can't prove she's wrong. I don't think it's going to happen. So I think we're all in that kind of quandary. I think the answer, at least that I've been trying for these years, and it seems to be helpful for folks, is speak in the I, right? Here's my experience. Here's what I believe. I want equality too. Here's where I stand. And that's why it's so great. And I mentioned Jared Huffman. Congressman Jamie Raskin, together with Jared Huffman, co-founded the Congressional Free Thought Caucus to advocate for secular Americans. As far as I know, Jamie Raskin calls himself a Reconstructionist Jew, but he has also called himself a humanist. So we don't need him to say, I'm a humanistic Jew. He is our champion in Congress. So yeah. That's fantastic. Thank you. I didn't know that. So the comment for those online was that hope was in Pandora's box. And why? Because hope can also be an evil. Basically, when it prevents you from taking action to make the world a better place. So I really appreciate that. I can't read the chat. So if someone online has something to say and you know how to put your hand up. Oh, have you read it? Okay. Do you want to stand here? They can see the chat, but they can't.
So. Hoping didn't get me. Anyway. So a couple of people from Ron Sieber, my favorite definition of courage is speaking truth to power, something we need to do more. And then Rabbi Eva Goldfinger said, hope is the willingness to see beyond the pain and suffering of the moment, to have and share the energy required to change what is not working. Bruce, I'm gonna try your last name, even though my last name is Ratnaswamy. Courage to talk to those who we disagree with and be both positive and constructive. So those were a couple of things in the chats from people around.
Great, thank you. That's great. So the comment was from the business world that it's often said hope is not a plan and that it could lead to inaction. Yeah, it's chilling almost, but I guess that's why I'm kind of defining hope as vision, and maybe I shouldn't, because they're two different things. Yeah, you know, another thing I think of with hope, though, also, frankly, is prayer, because I don't think that I pray, but when I fly, I hope real hard that the plane stays in the air. I don't like to fly. I do a lot of hoping on the plane, right? It's not directed at anybody, but it certainly is kind of like repetitive, and I wish I could turn it off even, but it's, I guess, hope. I don't know, but so, you know, it can apply in a lot of different ways. Thank you. That's helpful for me personally as well. The comment was about the anecdote I told of someone who chose death with dying, that the hope is that she got a choice, and maybe she had been hoping for that, and maybe that's something a lot of us hope for, and she got to enact it versus being hopeless about her situation. So yeah, that's a great point. Victoria. Right. The analogy is hope as the equivalent of thoughts and prayer, which is what we hear a lot of from folks who are actually in power and can do something and then choose not to, but they use these platitudes, and that is for sure a risk. Without hope, there is despair, but you can't let hope. Right. I mean, yeah, I'm now thinking about climate change today in the news. I don't know if you saw, but there's just going to be record heat from England to China. You know, the map was insane across Africa. It's just, a disaster, and yet the inaction on it, and yet we couldn't pass the bill because of one, I heard him described as a millionaire coal miner who prevented that bill from happening. And it's insane. And frankly, again, it's hard not to despair. It's hard not to turn to despair and say, let's grab our pitchforks, right? I fear that we're headed there, because that's where despair leads, is just destruction. But also, like with guns, for example, I feel like, again, I try to empathize. I know gun owners, and I feel like their answer might be, well, yeah, of course, in an ideal world, but why should I go first? But the reality is, when you step back and look at it, as I have from the comfort and safety of Japan, and I realized that Japan just had an assassination, and one of the reasons why it was so shocking is because there's almost no guns there, and it was the 10th shooting in over a year. There must have been 10 shootings since I started speaking, in America. It's so rare there, and but it happens, and it can be used to justify wanting to keep your guns. But the reality, the way I see it, is if you need a gun to protect yourself, you're living in a failed state. That is, to me, one of the definitions of a failed state. Like, what is the state? The state is an agreement among all of its citizens to live a certain way, and we're not doing it. And I wish I knew how to get to that point, but I can see it in other countries. People going bankrupt over medical expenses. It's only happening here. I don't understand who is defending it. But anyway, I often get frustrated that all we can do is talk about it, but I think that's, we can talk, we can march, we can try to get new people in power. It's nuts that everyone hates Congress and loves their congressperson for the most part. So it's really hard to imagine how we're going to really change. I think one answer, and I think an answer that humanistic Jews almost unanimously have to unanimously agree on, is education. I think we're a really heady bunch. And when you see people get educated, they are more liberal-minded, usually, statistically. And why is that? Why is there that relationship? And I think some folks would say it's indoctrination, right? Then let's stop the indoctrination that's happening in schools. But those of us who've been that way, I think, might be able to recognize that it's critical thinking, and that what they don't want is critical thinking. But I don't know, maybe I'm just so indoctrinated that I'm calling it critical thinking. I will say, again, getting back to Israel, without being too controversial, I feel like growing up, I was indoctrinated and not educated about Israel, and that I went on a journey myself, educating myself about it. And a couple of years ago, actually, I don't know if you know the podcast by Mark Maron called WTF. I won't tell you what WTF stands for. I think you know it. He had on Seth Rogen, the actor, who is so Jewish. They're both so Jewish. Mark Maron is openly atheist. I'd love for us to one day build an event around him and give him an award, because he talks about it all the time, about being proudly Jewish, openly atheist. And Seth Rogen talked, and he flat out said, I was lied to. He went to Jewish summer camp. This is what we want for our kids. And he said, I was lied to. I was told it was a land for a people with, the land was for a people without a land, in a land without a people. And I think we can all agree that that's an oversimplification, if nothing else. And that's what got picked up from their hour-and-a-half conversation, right? And he had to do all kinds of damage control. He had been honored by Workman's Circle. His dad worked for Workman's Circle. He's as Jewish as anybody. And yet, because of that, there was alarm bells. I grew up with that same indoctrination and was shocked to learn that I had been lied to. And when you have that experience, then you start to question everything. And maybe that's a good motto for humanistic Judaism too, is question everything. And we should be able to. And I think you come up with better answers when you ask, is this true? So I'm sorry it's not, a happy talk today, but there's real challenges. I do feel empowered by humanistic Judaism to ask the tough questions. And I'm always thrilled to talk with folks in our movement because of the emphasis on brains, and thought and questioning and civility almost always. So thank you so much for allowing me to talk.